This week we read the Torah portion of Pekudei. Pekudei means accounts. It's basically a list of accounts of all the different items that were used in the construction of the tabernacle. Now, the Talmud says, in Tractate Ta'anit, page 8b, a blessing does not rest on something unless it is hidden from the eyes. We have this concept of ayin hara, of evil eye. And in order to be blessed, the Talmud teaches that we shouldn't really show off. We shouldn't say how much money we have. We shouldn't boast about our talents, because this could attract the ayin hara, evil eye, and therefore have negative consequences. So the question is, and this was a question posed by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of Apt, 18th century Hasidic Rebbe. He said, how could the Torah make this public account of all the gold and silver and all the wealth of the tabernacle when we have this principle of ayin hara, that we shouldn't publicize our money and our talents in public? And he answers as follows. He says that how does ayin hara, how does evil eye work? What happens is that if a person looks lustfully or desirously or enviously at your money, your house, your car, your children, what actually could happen is that that desirous look could disconnect that entity, that object, from its spiritual source, and therefore have undesirable effects. But with the tabernacle, that wasn't a concern. You know why? Because the tabernacle was so connected to God that no amount of nasty, evil, envious looks could disconnect it. And that is why the Torah is not scared to publicize the accounts of the tabernacle. And there's a profound lesson here. First of all, I'm not into superstition and all that kind of stuff. Ayin hara is usually looked at as a superstitious kind of thing. But I think this is a powerful message from a Hasidic perspective, that the look of desire, the look of lust, the look of envy is damaging in itself. So we have to be so careful not to look upon people like that, and always have a win-win attitude, be glad about what people have, and be glad about what God is giving us. And also, it teaches us a profound message on the other hand, that if we're connected by observing the Torah, observing the commandments in the best way we can, so long as we remain connected to God, no ayin hara, no bad looks, no lustful looks are going to harm us, and we will always be with God, walk with God, and be successful. Now, the tabernacle is called the tabernacle of testimony. What is the testimony here? So Rashi says, 11th century biblical commentator, that this was a testimony to the Jewish people that God had genuinely forgiven them for worshipping the golden calf, since now he was making his presence dwell among them. So, because the people had been shamed by sin, they needed some sort of clear indication that they'd been forgiven, and that's what the tabernacle represented. And if you think about it, that is what we do every year ourselves. We have a Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, when we are forgiven from sin. But how do you know for sure that we've been forgiven? What tabernacle do we erect to prove that point? Answer is the sukkah. We build a little tabernacle in our garden. And that is the sign from God that we have been forgiven for our sins. That is an insight from Rabbi Judah Ariel Leib Alter of Gur, 19th century Hasidic Rebbe. Now, in this Torah portion, we read about the construction of the tabernacle, and on many, many instances, the Torah repeats that they did this at the command of Moses. What was the need to repeat this every time? So, Rabbi Jacob Joseph of Polonia, who was a disciple, one of the most primary disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, he was the author of the first Hasidic book, Toldos Yaakov Yosef, on the Torah, says the following insight. He says that every time you do a mitzvah, which if you're an avid watcher of Torah 10, you will know that the correct way of understanding mitzvah is a connection ritual, a sacred technology which connects you with God. Every time you do a mitzvah, it's crucial that in order to achieve that very profound connection with God, that you have the right kavanah, you have the right intention. You understand mystically what that mitzvah is achieving, how it's connecting you to God. But there's one problem. What if you're not a mystic? What are you going to do? The Jewish people were building the tabernacle. They knew they had to have the right kavanah, but they didn't really know exactly what to do. The Zohar says that the kavanah of building the tabernacle the correct tabernacle was, that as the tabernacle is erected below, so it was erected above. They had to imagine that what they were doing down here was a kind of graphic representation of the spiritual tabernacle in heaven. But a lot of these people were ordinary people. They were construction workers. How are they capable of having such a kavanah? So since they didn't really know what to think, they said, we're doing this as Moses commands. Because they knew that Moses understands the stuff. Moses gets the kavanah. He's having it for us. So whatever Moses' intention is, what his spiritual intention is, that's our intention. And actually you can do this same thing. It's a good idea to learn the Kabbalistic kavanahs of all the mitzvahs as explained in the writings of Rabbi Isaac Lurie and other mystics. But what if you can't? What if you don't know them all? What if you're simply incapable of remembering them? So a good piece of advice is to think that whatever the mystic kavanah is, I have that in mind. I don't know what it is yet. I'm not learned, I can't remember it. But whatever it is supposed to be, let that be my kavanah. And in that way you can actually enhance the power of connection of every mitzvah that you do. Chapter 39, verse 43, Moses saw the entire work, and look, they had done it as God had commanded. They had done it correctly, and so Moses blessed them. What's the big deal they'd done it correctly? I mean, if you had a commandment from God to do something, wouldn't you do it correctly? What's going on here? So, one way of looking at this is that religion can become an addiction. Do you observe the commandments because it makes you feel good? Because it is a cosmetic makeover for all your dysfunctional behaviors, so therefore you just observe and you feel good about it? If that's the case, then you're creating God in your own image. You're just using the Torah and the mitzvahs for your own purpose. Or do you do it because God commanded? Are you doing this as an act of sacred connection with the Almighty? That's the question. Moses saw the entire work, and look, they had done it as God commanded. They weren't just using these mitzvahs, these commands as a trip, as some sort of hype to make them feel good, to make them feel holy, to give them better than thou complexes. No, they'd done it as God commanded, and therefore he blessed them. Powerful message in terms of the importance of sincerity in a mitzvah to ensure the connection with God. Chapter 40, verse 18, Moses set up the tabernacle. Now Rabbi Avadia Sforno, 16th century biblical commentator, explains that the tabernacle refers specifically to the woven tapestries which cover the tabernacle. The way it was built, there was a wooden infrastructure underneath, and then the ceiling was made by throwing tapestries, these woven tapestries, over the top. But we're informed here, says the Sforno, that these coverings were set up before the supporting beams were erected. In other words, it would have made more sense to put the wooden structure and then you throw on top the tapestry. Instead, what they did is they held the tapestry on top, and then it was kind of held in midair somehow, and then they built the wood underneath. Odd way of doing things. Why was that? So, the reason, one of the hints here, was that Jewish people didn't really deserve the tabernacle. Tabernacle was God's home. It was a place where the Shekhinah, the palpable presence of the Almighty on earth, could be felt, could be seen, could be experienced, could be heard. These people had just worshipped the golden calf. They didn't deserve the tabernacle. So what was going on here? Really, God should have withheld it from them. But he didn't. But he hinted to the fact that they weren't quite ready by this funny order of building it. You see, the real tabernacle was the tapestries. The wood was just more of a supporting structure. So therefore, God said, I'm giving you the tabernacle before you have the support. Before you can really hold up that tapestry, I'm giving it to you. Tapestry had to hang in midair before the wood was built. And there's a beautiful message here, that even when we're not ready for an experience in life, even when your children are not quite ready for something, even when your students are not yet on the level they can understand something complex, sometimes you should give a taste of something higher. The fact you aren't ready doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have some experience of something which in the future you should aspire to, something you should yearn to, and something which you should realize is your spiritual heritage, but you're not yet ready to claim it. Spiritual message for the week. Parshat Pekudei, third portion of Pekudei, describes the building of the tabernacle. The previous Torah portion was its design, but now we actually built it. And that teaches us the advantage of the practical and the this-worldly over the theoretical and the heavenly. God could have had a spiritual, he could have said, I really want a spiritual tabernacle. And angels could build it and it would be perfect. But he said, no, my true desire, my true yearning is for an earthly tabernacle. Built by imperfect people, built by human beings of flesh and blood who need to eat, and have all sorts of whims and desires, those are the ones that I want to build a tabernacle. And that teaches us the most profound message of Judaism, which is that God is to be found here in this world. You don't have to escape. You don't have to have out-of-body experiences. The true desire, the most powerful spiritual connection to God, can actually, ironically, be found in simple physical acts, in giving charity, in helping someone across the road, in providing lunch for someone hungry, in smiling at someone in a store. All these little things in this physical world, that's what God really craves. That is described by the Medrash as his ta'ava. He desired to be felt, to be at home in this world. And that is the message of Parshat Pekudei, the this worldly, the practical, the imminent. That is what God desires most. Thank you very much for listening, and join us next week for Torah in 10.